Brothers and sisters, elders, scholars, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm so honored to be in such a brilliant gathering, and I would firstly like to thank Amanati for inviting me and for putting on this program, because I think it's so important, as has already been highlighted. So before I start, I want to ask you a question, and I don't want an answer said aloud. Just think it to yourself and be honest. Think about your unfiltered thoughts. When you saw me come here on stage, taking someone's arm, what one of your first thoughts? Was it, oh, poor guy, he needs someone's arm to get on stage? Or was it, oh, bless him, he can't see? Or was it, oh my God, that guy's cool? If it was the third, you're fine, but if it was the first two, maybe not. And again, as Sheikh Shumani mentioned very eloquently and articulately, it's not because we're at fault, it's more because of the context, the environment, the exposure that we've had, which has been so limited, which has always made disability or difference appear in a negative light, rather than being something beautiful that we need to cherish, that we need to enhance, that we need to make better. Because as we already heard, if we were all the same, if all the movies were the same, what would be nice in this world? Not very much. So before I tell you a little bit about myself, I just want to make sure you guys are all awake, because I can't see if you are. So I do want some answers shouted out, if that's all right, just for some stats. So what do people think? How many disabled people do we have around the world? Any answers? What's that? A few million, okay.
1% of the population.
Okay. One more? Come on, guys, there's no prizes, it's fine.
That's why they were
Okay, so that is probably, yes, it's just over 1 billion people. About 15% of the world's population has some form of a disability. That is absolutely huge. But more importantly, that comes with a huge opportunity as well. So for those of you who are dying to give an answer but didn't get a chance, here's a second question. So the purple pound, which you may have come across, is the spending power of disabled people and their families. Just for the UK, how big do we think that is, the value of the purple pound? Any answers? Any guesses? Come on, you can be brave.
Is this compared to a pound?
No, so it's just the absolute value of, so basically the spending power of disabled households, essentially.
Yeah.
I would guess so, yeah. No, I'll give you the answer, guys, to keep the time. It's 249 billion pounds. That is a lot of money and a lot of lost potential. So I want to tell you a little bit about my story. So I was born to an incredible Indian mother and Pakistani father. So you can already see the problem. I was born with an eye condition called congenital glaucoma, which is a genetic condition, and I was born with very limited sight, which gradually kept on reducing, and by the age of 7, I had lost my sight completely. But I still have incredible parents who always believed that disability is not the same as inability. My mum was incredibly keen to get me into a regular school with sighted girls and boys, so I too could have those same opportunities. And yes, things were difficult being the only blind student in that school. Yes, things were really hard when I couldn't see what was on the board. Yes, things were really hard when I couldn't solve maths equations as easily as someone else could. But we persevered. We took on that challenge. And it really opened up so many windows and so many eyes, not just for our teachers, but loads of people around us. And that really gave me the confidence to think about following my dreams and what I'm passionate about. And that's what really led me to do my undergrad and master's degrees in engineering, because loads of people said, you can't do engineering, you can't even see what a laboratory experiment is all about. But it's really about carving those paths that can really show you how can you make the impossible possible. And I won't take credit for this because it absolutely wasn't me. It was the support of Allah and the incredible love and the support that I had from my friends, from my parents and my teachers that all made it possible. And I hope that I can inspire other people to follow their dreams as well, because there's too many people who tell us you can't do this, and very, very few people who stand by us and say, I will be with you no matter what. But there's other interests that I like outside of kind of education and work as well. I absolutely, as you would have heard in the introduction, absolutely love sports. And, you know, I've done everything from like 100 meters to last year running the London Marathon in a time that I was really happy with, doing Ride London, but more importantly, blind tennis being one of my favorite sports, and alhamdulillah, getting an opportunity to play in the World Championships in 2019, which is when they last happened. And I'm not saying any of this to brag or to show off, but to tell you that just because someone has a disability doesn't mean they can't do things, doesn't mean they don't have dreams, doesn't mean they don't have passions. Yes, I am blind. Yes, I'm proud of it, and it's an important part of who I am, but it doesn't define me. That's not the only thing that you associate or should be associating with me. And that's what brings me to the social model of disability. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with this, but what we often hear get badged around is the medical model of disability. Oh, this person has autism, or this person's on a wheelchair, or this person's blind, or this person's deaf. And yes, that's all correct, but what's really important is the environment. And what the social model of disability actually says is the environment that disables a person, not their physical condition. So let me give you an example. If you think about a building that only has stairs, a person with a wheelchair probably can't get very far. But if the building had ramps, they probably can. The person's medical disability hasn't changed, but what has changed is the environment which has enabled them to access that building. Similarly, if you have a situation where perhaps someone can't hear, the hearing itself won't change, but having something like live captioning, like British Sign Language, will enable them to be part of that conversation. And that's what we need to think about. We can't change what Allah has given us when we're born or acquire later in life. What we can change is the environment. What we can change is how we respond to that. And that brings me to my next point around inclusive design. Back in the day, there were a few people who perhaps were quite keen on thinking, how can we make specialist technology for people who have a disability or who have a certain condition? And I think that was great. But the trouble with a lot of that is, you can't really bucket lots of disabled people into a small group because they are very niche and we like to be a little bit fussy. But also because it's not such a big market, they tend to be really expensive. And now we're moving to this amazing concept of inclusive design, where you design for everybody, regardless. Where you design for the extreme so that everyone in the middle falls in. And you might be wondering, why would I waste my time doing that? But think about how much economic and practical sense that makes. So again, let's take an example. Text messages may have been started to help the deaf community. But who in this room, honestly, does not use text? We all do, because sometimes, just like if you're bored with my talk and want to text someone, you'd rather do that than speak to them on the phone, because that would just be outright rude. So some of those things can really help us, not just the specific groups that they are meant for. But more importantly, I, for example, have a permanent disability. Someone might, let's say in a sporting accident, might break their arm, and might be in a cast for 6 months or so. That's a temporary disability. But I can guarantee you, every single person in this room has been in what I would call a situational disability. Maybe you were pushing a pushchair and only had one hand that you could use. Maybe you were standing under the sun and the light was too bright. Designing for everybody makes sure that you take care of all of this, the normal situations, the permanent disabilities, the situational ones which every one of us faces. So the next time you're thinking about a problem, try to think about it in a more all-encompassing way and what you can do to help everybody. Unfortunately, our centres and our institutions and our community aren't at a stage where we can really feel proud of welcoming people with difference, but there are some incredible examples that you can see. And one that rings to mind is Stanmore, and I think they did a really good job in Muharram when they provided BSL interpreters for some of the deaf community. And I was like, this is absolutely brilliant, because then they can be part of the regular programs as well. But then when we think about communication as well, how many times do you have incredible artists and people and creators in our community who design amazing posters, and I love that. I think we definitely need more of that. But do we ever think about maybe having captions to those photographs so people like myself, when they receive that on their phone, have a means to follow what's actually being said in the photo? And I want to just give credit to Sister Zahra for that, because when she was sending me information and when she has communicated with me in the past and sent pictures, from what I can recall, it's always come with a description, always come with what that picture is about, so that I can understand what's in there. So when we think about posters, yes, let's make them fancy and really pretty, but also let's think about things like alternate text. Let's think about how can you make others feel included as well. And I want to briefly touch on terminology, because that I feel is a really important thing as well, especially now in the world in which we live, where political correctness is so important and we don't want to be wrong, we don't want to offend anyone, and we're like, can I say this? Well, let's get the record straight here. I love to say to people when I meet them, lovely to see you, and they're like, wow, but you can't see me. It's like, yeah, it's a way of saying. So if you tell me, and think about the situation, if you say, Naqi, did you watch the match last night? Sorry, did you hear the match last night? What that's done is, it's automatically made me feel like you are a lot more aware of my disability, and I'm making a point out of it. Using language like, did you see the match? Have you read that book? Is normal terminology that we'd use even with a friend that we're speaking to on the phone. That just because we can't see them or they can't see us doesn't mean we change the way in which we talk. And unfortunately, sometimes in our community, I feel we tend to think that we know it all. I can tell you so many examples here where I've gone to a center and gone for salah, and one of the first questions I can ask is, do you like a chair? It's like, I'm not sure what connection not being able to see has to being able to sit on the floor, unless I'm missing a very important point, which I would really appreciate if someone can help me understand. And you might not always know, and you don't need to know what's the best way to approach someone, because we can't be experts when it comes to all sorts of difference and diversity, which again is beautiful. If there's one thing that you take away from this, it is to say, what can I do to help, or how can I help you? Because then you're not assuming anything, and you're giving control to that person so that they can determine what's the best way to help them out, because all of us need help in different ways. Us assuming isn't going to be the answer. The other thing which we often find, particularly in the older generation, hopefully inshallah it's going to get better with the younger ones, is things around marriage. And this has nothing to do with disability. Obviously that's one part of it. But we tend to get so fixated, as the Shaykh was beautifully articulating earlier, on those physical, tangible features about how wealthy a person is, how successful they are, how they look, rather than what their soul's made of. Why is it so difficult in our community for people who have a disability, or who are different, or who aren't that well off, to do something which is literally half of our faith? I want you to think about it, and I know it's not easy answers. It's not something that we're going to resolve tonight. But the first step is to acknowledge the problem, and then to start thinking about it as well. I just want to end with something which, for me, has been one of the most beautiful quotes, because what we all can do now is to think about how we can appreciate and love diversity and difference, how we can welcome anyone and everyone, how we can become more knowledgeable, more involved, because everyone should feel a part of this amazing community, not just a few who are the quote-unquote normal. I'm not very good with my hadith and stuff, so forgive me, but I will paraphrase. But I'm sure everyone's heard of this very famous hadith. Why do you consider yourself to be insignificant when within you is the entire universe? And that applies to absolutely all of us. We might think of ourselves as not so great, but we all absolutely are. The only difference is we haven't found our potential yet. And we can't do it alone. We need everyone else to be on the journey with us. And I hope that today, before you sleep, you will make that pledge to yourself to think differently, to change your glasses, and to think about how you can see the world slightly differently. We don't want to leave it too late. We don't want to ostracize or alienate people from our community who can add so much value. So once again, thank you for being an incredible audience, and thank you, Amanati, for putting up something which I think is so important, and I'm glad we're all having a conversation about this. So may Allah bless you all, and thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.
صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. I think we will all agree that that was very eye-opening, very inspirational, mashallah, and very, very well said. Just a few points that I want to emphasize upon is that the environment, when we create the right environment, everyone will flourish. And that is a question that we must all ask ourselves. Is our centres the right environment? Have we enabled easy accessibility to our centres? Can they access, those with a disability, can they access the mosque easily? In the time of the Holy Prophet ﷺ, there was an individual who was blind, who could not see, and the Prophet tied a rope to the masjid and to his house. So every time this individual wanted to come to the masjid, he would just take the rope and he would pull it, and he was able to get to the masjid. And we must ask ourselves, are we enabling, is there easy access to our mosques? Another point I wanted to mention is that often when we discuss disability within our community, and I've been to a few lectures on disability, we often focus on disability within children, special need children, disability within children. But we forget that these children are going to become adults. There are adults in our community with a disability, with a childhood disability, but where are they? There's adults in our community with autism. Where are they? There's adults in our community with Down syndrome. Where are they? Are we, for example, creating a side majlis which enables them to come and benefit? And our religion is beautiful. Our religion is truly beautiful. And these individuals would love to flourish within our community, but are we creating the right environment within our community where they can attend majalis, where they can come and their loud noises or would not disrupt others? And it's quite interesting, and I really have to mention this, because before, a couple of days ago, I mentioned that I was attending this majlis, I was attending this conference to speak, and a lady in our community, an elderly lady in our community said, well, if someone has a disabled child, why don't they just stay at home? Because they will, if they come, they may ruin it for others, and others want to benefit from the lecture. And I wish I was making this up. I really do wish I was making this up. But this is actually a reality. People feel like if you have a disability, if you're disruptive to others, then staying at home is perhaps the best way, because you will ruin it for others. And this is something that has been voiced, and this is a wrong mentality. And the only way that we can change this mentality is with conferences like this. The only way we can change this mentality is when we come up and we talk about disability, we talk about our centres, how our centres are operating, and if we are creating the right environments for those with a disability to flourish, so that those with a disability or parents with a child with a disability can walk in the centre with their head held up high and know that their needs are being taken care of.